Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Teresa. Today I'm just doing a cozy video because quite frankly it is cold in my house and I don't feel like, eating out of my blankets and my sweater, so it's gonna be cozy. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Like I said, if you don't know who I am, my name's Teresa and I am doing my January wrap-up. I did not have a very good reading month in January. I didn't read very much and okay reading. I had a 3.5, a 3, a 2.5, and one 4.5. So kind of all over the place as far as my reading goes. So January was like not the best month for me. I had my grandma's memorial and then the first couple weeks of January I was really busy. Well, actually the first week of January I wasn't even home. I was in Boise visiting my boyfriend. And then came home for the funeral, and then after the funeral we did a lot of stuff with the house to get the house ready to sell. So it's just been crazy. I have not had much time to read. Though on the way home from Boise I actually finished an audiobook, which is the first book I read this year, and that's Divine Blindside by Hope Callahan. This is the third book in this series. Let me check what it's called. It's the Divine Christian Cozy Mysteries. That was book number 3. This is a really cute series. It's pretty much what it says. It's Christian Cozy Mystery, which is like super cool. I started this in December and I finished it in January on my way home from Idaho. So since this is book 3, I can't really tell y'all what it's about too much, but I'll tell you about book 1 or like kind of the series in a whole. So the series follows this woman named Jo Pepperdine who runs a halfway house for females basically who are just getting out of prison. It's like ex-cons pretty much, and she bought this property in Divine, Kansas. It's this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. Apparently it's like this tourist attraction because there's something, I can't remember what it is, but people come all the time. So she bought this place and is basically running a halfway house for these women to kind of help them get back on their feet and kind of re-establish themselves in society after getting out of prison, because if you don't have help you're likely to reoffend and be resubmitted. So the first book starts out by this woman, basically she just got released from prison and she tries to, let's just say, make herself no more. And she is rescued, I guess, in this town of Divine, they call them Divine Miracles, where just random miracles happen. So 2 strangers rescue her, and then she goes to Joe's house, and yeah, they go from there. Okay, so this woman, Raylene, she meets Joe, and it kind of kicks off from there. So they have the halfway house, but they also have like a mercantile, a bakery and a mercantile that they are able, that's kind of how they make their money, and the women are able to, like, they take shifts and they rotate through all these things, they learn life skills. It's really, really cool concept. And of course, because it's a cozy mystery, there's going to be a murder, right? So in the very first book, Joe and the halfway house and all the women are very new to town, and the town isn't too sure about them because it's a tiny little town. They're very close-knit, very, small town America, and now all of a sudden you're bringing in these felons, right, into their little town, and they don't know how they feel about it. So in the beginning of the first book, there are vandalisms happening to the house and to the mercantile, so what it's called, little shop, whatever, and they're trying to figure out who's doing that. And then they have like an open house to try and like invite people over and be like, hey, we're really not that bad. And someone is found, or they found a wallet or something in the bathroom, and that guy's body is found dead. Wow, that guy's body is found. He is found dead. And it kind of kicks off from there. So just as like any cozy mystery, if you ever read a cozy mystery, it's just kind of fun. It's a murder, obviously, it's a mystery, but especially these ones, they're clean, they're Christian, there's a lot of faith content in here, a lot of kind of dealing with losing your faith and regaining your faith, while also ones who've never believed before and now who are starting to believe. And you just kind of have like this redemption story because it's these women who are ex-cons, right? They're felons who are being taken care of and like taught how to live. And yeah, anyways, it's a really, really cute series. I think it's great. So I recommend this, especially if you are looking for a good Christian fiction. Like I said, the faith content in this is really good. And I really can't wait to continue the series, but I read book 3, which is Divine Blindside. So yeah, I just realized I totally just told you guys what the book was about. and I was like gonna continue the next book, and like I didn't even tell you my thoughts on it. Okay, so wow, I really need to work on the wrap up thing. Okay, I am using Compile and by from G by Book Roast is her spreadsheet on like kind of rating system, and also Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy, she came up with her own like weighted rating system. Like I will go ahead and link their videos down below if you guys are interested. Sorry if you hear the computer buzzing. So I'm going to be using Cassidy's version to kind of go through my ratings here. So Divine Blindside, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it's book 3. I feel like the characters are really starting to come into their own, really starting to learn more about them. You're getting a little bit of back in book 3, you get some back history and you learn a secret about Joe that's kind of been hinted at through the first 2 books. And you're really getting more involved in the town, with the townspeople. And the great thing about these books too is like Joe's best friend and like kind of her partner is a cook and a baker. And at the end of every book, there's a recipe that they talked about. So I'm really excited to like go back and get the recipes and try them. Like, it's gonna be so much fun. So for the rating system here, we have characters, plot, writing, setting, enjoyment. Then it gives you your score, which is 1 to 10, or 0, I guess, through 10. And then you have your stars, which are 0 to 5 star. And I do a half star, so it's like 0.5, 1, 1.5, blah, 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 all the way up to 5 star. If you want to know more about this rating system and kind of like how, because I'm kind of following like what Cassidy like wrote in here of like how she rates her book. So like, you know, if you have like a 10, it's like perfect, none to very little issues. If you have a 3, it needs more work, 75% bad, 25% good, that kind of thing. So if you want to know how like the rating system works, like just check out her stuff, I'll link it below. Anyways, for characters, I rated it 8. Like I said, I think the characters are really fleshed out. I think that they're really coming into their own. You're learning more about a different character in each book. Like there's definitely reoccurring characters in each book, but each one kind of focuses on different women within the home, which I really like and I think is actually quite interesting. Plot, I gave it a 7, which is like, it's pretty good. I didn't really have any issues with it, but it wasn't like mind blowing, you know, it was just a fun, interesting journey. And so yeah, writing also was a 7. I like it. I didn't have any issues with it. It just is what it is. The setting, I rated a 6, and this was because you don't really, I mean, you kind of get the setting, like the setting of a small town, you kind of get the small town vibes, but it wasn't really like super heavy on the setting. It was more character focused than setting focused. So I gave it a 6, and then 8 was, or enjoyment was an 8. Because like I said, I really had a good time listening to this. I was fun, it made me laugh. I definitely found myself trying to piece out the puzzles and like see if I could catch like red herrings and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it was an 8, so it was really fun. And that score turns out to be a 7.33, which is a 3.5 star. Which actually, these are pretty accurate to how I would rate it, because I've never done the rating system before. I've always just given it a star rating. And so like going through this and kind of really making me think about what I think about the books, I have found so far anyways, of the 5 books I've read this year, that this lines up pretty accurate with what the star rating I would have given it anyways. So yeah, it's cool. Okay, book 2 is Lioness Rampant by Tamara Pierce. This is the 4th and final book in the Song of the Lioness series. And this one, basically, again, it's another series, so it's difficult to talk about, but it begins with this girl, Alana, who disguises herself as a boy to join night school. Is that, I would even, like, I don't know, she wants to become a knight, like of the round table, you know, kind of thing. Like, it's medieval times, it's fantasy, but yeah, she basically disguises herself as a boy because girls are not allowed to be knights, and she goes and apprentices under, or as a page, and you know, the whole thing of like her becoming a knight, and it's like her trying to hide who she is as she's growing up. She's an orphan. It's this really fun story, and throughout the books you're kind of watching her grow up. By book 4 she is a woman, and yeah, I can't really talk about it without like spoiling it, but anyways, book 1, yeah, she disguises herself as a knight, and it's really cute and it's fun, and she's kind of this spunky, rambunctious, because she's like really small and she has to like prove herself, you know, because everyone teases her because, I mean, she's a girl, so she's a little bit on the smaller side compared to the boys, but they think she's a boy, so they think she's like this tiny boy. And she's like super spunky and really has to like prove her merit and prove that like she can do this and pass all of her classes and pass the courses and all this stuff. And there's this evil sorcerer kind of guy like lurking in the background that everyone else kind of like thinks like, oh yeah, he's great, but she like knows there's something wrong with him, and so it's her trying to figure out what's wrong with him. And you kind of follow just her story throughout this whole thing from, you know, young child in knight, learning to be a knight, into adulthood and the adventures that she goes on as an adult. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It has an animal companion. It's really cute. A talking cat. So she can talk to the cat can talk to her. Basically, the cat only talks to who it likes. So like to everyone else, it sounds like it's just meowing, but she can hear it. And certain people can hear it if the cat wants you to hear it. And there's like gods and goddesses and wizards, magicians, that kind of thing. So it's very much, I think it was written in the 80s and it's like a YA fantasy. So this was the 4th book. I liked it. I thought the conclusion was pretty good. There was a kind of like a big bad in this that I felt, I don't know, I didn't really feel it. You know, the big bad from book 1 kind of has a part in book 4 again. I thought that was kind of a cop-out, kind of like you can't think of a better bad guy. I don't know. I just, it felt a little weird to me. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was fun. It was a quick read. It's very adventurous, very fast-paced, but it was okay. I mean, the series overall, I think, is about a 3-star series. So would I necessarily recommend it? No. Would I like say stay away from it? No. You know what I mean? Like, if it sounds interesting to you, pick it up. I think if you are a younger reader, younger fantasy reader, you would enjoy it. I don't know, it didn't really do much for me. It was just kind of like, it's a cute story, but nothing earth-shattering, or like I wasn't super invested in the characters. I don't know, wasn't really what I wanted out of what I was looking for. I was looking for a bit more adventure. Like, it was definitely more, I think, character driven than plot driven. And I'm definitely a plot-driven reader, so there's that. Okay, ratings. For an 8, for characters, I give it an 8, because like I said, the characters, especially in like book 4, like you really know the characters and you really know who they are. You kind of can like get a good grasp of who is who and what their motivations are and all that kind of stuff. Plot was a 5, because like I said, it really wasn't much plot. It was more character, and there was a little bit of a plot, obviously, but it didn't really go anywhere for me. And like I said, it kind of wrapped up what happened in book 1, but I felt like that was unnecessary, because I felt like book 1 really wrapped it up as its own. So it was just revisiting things that like we didn't need to revisit. Writing was an 8. I think the writing was really, really good. There was nothing wrong with it at all. Like I said, it didn't capture me, but it doesn't mean it was bad, you know. Setting, I gave it a 5 as well. It wasn't like book 2 and 3 definitely has more of a setting. You're back at the castle in book 4 and really don't get much description of the setting or anything. It's more, like I said, character work. And enjoyment was a 7, so it was fun. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. It was just a fun read to listen to when I'm driving. So that ends up being a 6.33, which ends up being a 3-star, which, like I said, it's accurate to what I would have just rated it, you know. Without doing this, I would have just rated it a 3-star. Book number 3, like I said, I've only read 4 books this month, was Something in the Water by Catherine Steadman. Okay, a shocking discovery on a honeymoon in paradise changes the lives of a perfect picture couple. If you could make one simple choice that would change your life forever, would you? Could the life of your dreams be the stuff of nightmares? Have you ever wondered how long it takes to dig a grave? So basically, this is about this couple who get married and they go on the honeymoon to Bora Bora, and when they're out scuba diving, they find something in the water that could change their life, depending on what they do with it. And that's kind of like, yeah, it's this thing that you find, and it's like, ooh, you know, should we tell the police or should we keep it for ourselves kind of situation. And depending on what they do, depends on a lot of things. So I didn't like this book. I really didn't like this book. I almost DNF'd it like twice. I have a hard time DNFing things. Like, I really have a hard time DNFing things because I need to know what happens. Even if it sucks, I need to know what happens. And so this is a problem of mine that I have. Like, I just need to let it go and be like, nope, I don't need to know what happens. It's fine. It's not a good book. I can just move on with my life. But I have trouble not knowing what happens. So yeah, I almost DNF'd it twice. I just couldn't get into it. Start out in the beginning. Well, the very first chapter, basically, you find out the main character is digging a grave. And you find out that she's digging a grave for her husband. And so in the very beginning, you know he's dead. It's one of those books that, like, you already know, and now you have to go back in time and see what happened to work up to this. And it started out and I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. I felt like the beginning was pretty slow. Like, it dragged a bit going into, because you kind of see them when they get like right when they get engaged, through the wedding planning, all that stuff up into the wedding, and then the honeymoon. And I felt like until we get to the honeymoon, it dragged. Like it was really slow. It was just really monotonous. I understand why the author kind of brought you through, like didn't just start at the honeymoon, because she's kind of setting up the relationship and the dynamics between the characters. It wasn't very exciting for me. It was very slow paced. And you're kind of like led to believe that these characters are like the perfect couple, right? But there's just this stuff that happens and a couple things that the husband or the fiance at the time does or says that makes you just kind of, at least me, I was kind of like cringe. And like you're supposed to though, like I think the author is kind of setting it up like, you know, everyone thinks of this perfect couple, but are they really? Kind of that situation. It's just a couple things that he did, I was just like, no, like that would never fly in my relationship. Like if my fiance ever did that or ever said that to me, like I wouldn't just blow it off as, oh, it's okay, he's stressed. Like no, heck no. I feel like I would be so mad. I'm like, you are not doing that, sir. No, this is not okay. Another thing that this book had, my least favorite trope of all time, okay, is like the miscommunication trope. But like not even miscommunication, but like this is purposely hiding things from the other person in order to protect them. Or because you're afraid that they won't like you, or I don't want to stress them out, so I'm gonna like hide this really pertinent and important information that, you know, obviously they're hiding it because that's the conflict later in the story, but it drives me crazy because I'm like, if you would have just been honest and you would have just like talked about the thing that you need to talk about in the very beginning, none of that would have happened. And I get that's kind of the point of like the book, but like I hate it though. I hate it so much. Miscommunication stuff just bothers the crap out of me, and especially the whole thing of like, well, I don't want to stress him any more than he's already stressed, so I'm just not going to tell him this really important thing that he really should know. And it's wrong for me not to tell him this because it, you know, majorly would change his life, but I can't tell him. I'll tell him later because he's stressed. Yeah. So there was a lot of that in this book. A lot of secrets, a lot of the, you know, and not even like keeping them for a good reason. You know what I mean? It's just bothered me. Okay, so we go to the honeymoon and the action, it picks up, the pace picks up, I'm getting more interested, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, I'm ready to find out what the heck is in the water and what do they find. And you finally get to the point where they find the thing in the water, but they find out what the thing is, right? And they're like, okay, do we keep this or do we hand it over to authorities? And they're kind of trying to decide what to do. And from here, it just got stupid, in my opinion. I'm sorry. The character, the wife, kept making the dumbest choices. And she just drove me crazy. She was so stupid. And she kept making all these choices. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, I understand why the author made her make these choices because it, like, propelled the story forward. But it just bothered me because I was just like, really? You really, like, that dumb? And you're gonna do these things? And she kept doing this stuff over and over and over again. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, give it up. Like, this is so dumb. I'm so mad at this book. Like I said, I wanted to DNF it a couple times. I just feel like, okay, you get to kind of the climax of the story and like the big, like, oh, you know, and the husband is revealed to be someone who he is not. But like, I felt like it was a complete character shift, and like all of a sudden he was like, did this thing that's like, well, that doesn't make any sense for the character. Like the author was kind of hinting in the beginning that he was like not who he says he was, or he wasn't quite like something wasn't quite right within their marriage. But then at the very end, this thing happens and it's just like, what? Like, I get that he was off, but like, what? Because it didn't make sense for the character. It was just like he was a completely different person all of a sudden. And these events unfold and then you find out how he dies and what happens and all that. I just was very unsatisfied. Like I said, I felt like it was too slow in the beginning, it was pretty good in the middle, and then the ending was just kind of like and between the stupid choices that the character was making that just really didn't make any sense at all. She was just dumb. And then the lies and the hiding things and the total 180 in the character, like I said, you were kind of hinted at that he wasn't necessarily the best dude, but then to go from maybe he's not the best dude to all of a sudden this like really bad thing that happens, it's like, it was just too big of a leap for me personally. I did see that this was a debut by this author, so I'm curious I will check her out again and read some other of her works and see maybe if some of these things that I didn't like in her debut, she might have fixed in her later works. I don't know. But yeah, so for the rating system, I gave it a 5 for characters because they didn't they didn't really feel super fleshed out either, or like really got to know them. They were just kind of like there. Plot, I gave it a 6. I felt like a lot of the choices the character was making was like making them just move the plot along. It wasn't like organic. It just felt like, oh, I have to make the character do this or else the story can't move forward. So it was a 6. Writing was a 6. It was good. Like, it's just kind of, 6 is like middle of the road, right? Like, it wasn't good, it wasn't bad. It didn't really astound me, but it wasn't bad. Setting was a 7. She did do a decent job. Like, you start out in like London and then you go to Bora Bora and then you're back in London. And so, especially in Bora Bora during the honeymoon, like there was a tropical storm that came, and so she was kind of describing it. But I felt like she really could have leaned into that a lot more than she did. Enjoyment was a 3 because I really did not like this book at all. So that ends up with a score of a 5 out of 10, which is a star rating of 2.5. So yeah, it was not great. So I had a 3.5, a 3, and a 2.5. So I'm like going downhill. Not good. But the last book I read in January was it saved the day because I was like, this month is just not great. And so I was like, okay, this is a super hype book that was super hyped when it came out. I've wanted to read it. I got it checked out from the library. I might as well just pick it up. I'm just gonna do it. And that was Lore by Alexander Bracken. And I gotta say, I'm so glad I read this because this was a great book. This book, I totally get the hype and I totally think it deserves the hype. This is a Greek mythology, I don't know if you'd call it a retelling, but it's like based on Greek mythology, which I love. So, every 7 years, the Agon begins. As punishment for past rebellion, 9 Greek gods are forced to walk the earth as mortals, hunted by the descendants of ancient bloodlines, all eager to kill a god and seize the divine power and immortality. Long ago, Lore Perseus fled the brutal world in the wake of her family's sadistic murder by a rival line, turning her back on the hunt's promise of eternal glory. For years, she's pushed away any thought of revenge against the man, now God, responsible for their deaths. Yet, as the next hunt dawns over New York City, 2 participants seek out her help: Castor, a childhood friend of Lore, believed long dead, and a gravely wounded Athena, among the last of the original gods. The goddess offers an alliance against their mortal enemy, and at last a way for Lore to leave the Agon behind forever. But Lore's decision to bind her fate to Athena's and rejoin the hunt will come at a deadly cost, and still may not be enough to stop the rise of a new god with the power to bring humanity to its knees. Like I said, I enjoyed this book a lot. This was super fun. It kept me engaged. It's one of those books that like I was listening to it on audio and I kept like not wanting to stop. And my boyfriend called me and I was like, can I call you back? Because like I need to listen to my audiobook. Because this is so good. Like, I'm gonna do nothing else until I finish this book because I just have to keep reading it. Like it says, there's this girl named Lore, and her name's really pretty. It's Ballora, which I just think is a really pretty name. But she goes by Lore, and she is like, doesn't want anything to do with this world because her family was killed, and she's just like, I'm out. And then until Athena appears on her doorstep, and she's kind of like, oh great, I kind of have to help you because there's this bleeding woman on my doorstep in the middle of New York City. So she takes her in and helps her, and then, like it says, she makes an alliance with her to bring down this god. He's the new Ares, and because he killed her family, and so she's after him and wants to be done with it forever and always. Okay, that's where it starts out, and it just gets so good. It's super fast paced, it's super adventurous, but I feel like it's fast paced, but not the sense of like it's go 24/7. Like it definitely had some slower, more quieter breaks, but it was like in a good way. I felt the author did a really good job of the ebb and flow of this book was smooth. I didn't feel jarred into a scene, or like it wasn't like it was super adventurous then all of a sudden ends. It felt very organic, the way that the book flowed, the way that the plot flowed. I liked the take that the author did on the Greek mythology and kind of talking about the gods, and they do touch upon the story of Medusa and how Medusa, basically for those of you who do not know Medusa's story, she's the woman with the snake hair that turns men to stone. In the original myth, she was raped by Poseidon in Athena's palace and Athena, or her temple. Athena was pissed, and so she punished Medusa, became a Gorgon. But they kind of talk about that and how Laura is talking to her and she's like, how can you be the champion of women yet you do this horrible thing to her? And it kind of explains the story and it puts a twist on it that I really liked. Like I said, you're gonna get to know a little bit about the gods. There's some storylines that I don't remember ever learning about when I learned Greek mythology, but I was also in 8th grade when I learned Greek mythology, and that was a long time ago. So yeah, I really actually want to kind of go back and restudy it now because it was really fun. And like hearing these names and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Or like all these families that are hunting the gods, they're all descendants of legendary heroes from Greek mythology. And so it's kind of fun to hear names brought up again and try to remember like, okay, which was that hero? What did they do? And another thing that I really like about this book, this is very much like female empowerment because it talks about how in their world, in the Agon, men are still the leaders, men are still the boss. And it was for a long time like a woman couldn't fight, and a woman was not allowed to kill because she was not allowed to be a leader of their clan and be a god. Only the men could, even though they were killing like women gods. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, it kind of touches on that and talks about how Laura feels like it's wrong that if a woman or a girl wants to fight, then she should be allowed to fight, and her sex should not determine her place in the hierarchy, basically. And then same fold, if a guy doesn't want to, then he shouldn't have to either, you know? So it kind of dealt like that with that, and I thought it did a really good job of broaching on that subject. This was a bit gory for sure. I mean, it's YA, so it wasn't terrible, but there were a few scenes that you're like, oh, that's gross, because when they're talking about killing the gods and then people die, that like it happens. Like I said, the plot I felt was really well paced. It never felt lacking, and it felt like it took breaks when it needed to take breaks, so you're not just going all the time. There were a few problems I had with it, really little stuff, but the kind of took me out of the story a little bit. So the first thing that which is like, it's YA, of course, this is going to be in here. There's like this passionate love making, like kissing scene, right? But the problem was, this happened, and this is a thing, and I've heard other people talk about this too, that's like so annoying. It's like, oh, it's the end of the world, or oh, it's like this super battle is happening, but we're just gonna sit here and make out, or like we're gonna hook up because, you know, that's what we have time for, and that's what's really on our mind, not, you know, the end of the world, whatever. This case wasn't necessarily the end of the world, but like, literally she's like fighting this guy and they're battling and like fighting for her life, and he gets away and she's like gonna go chase after him. And this dude that she's like, you kind of get the fact that like from the very beginning, if you read YA anyways, I kind of knew that there was going to be like friends to lovers kind of situation. I mean, it's just kind of obvious in a YA book. But the dude that she's kind of like into shows up, and then they just start making out, and it's like, but you were literally just fighting for your life and you were like gonna chase him down and stop him, but instead you decide to make out and let him go. Like, that makes sense. So that really took me out of the story. I mean, I get it, like it's YA, that's kind of like the thing in those books that they do, but it just was like, really, of all the times now, like whatever. So that took me out of the story a little bit. And then another thing that did as well was the big bad, the way he was talking to Lore or to some of the teenagers. So like, I guess like I would almost say this is a new adult book, not a YA book, because it was a little bit more mature, but it's still a clean book. Like, there wasn't anything like super bad in it. It's just they're a little bit older, like she's like 18, 19, I think. But the way that he's talking to her in like his villain monologue, right, is just childish. And it's like he's having this argument, like this childish argument with her. And I'm just like thinking, I'm like, okay, would this super sophisticated, rich, powerful, like mob boss basically be literally sitting here arguing with a 19-year-old about this topic and being like childish and be like, no, I'm right, like that kind of thing? It just was like, no, I don't think that's how it would have actually happened in real life. So that was another thing that took me out just a little bit, because I was like, I'm pretty sure if you're like this all-powerful god, mob boss, leader guy, you wouldn't even bother yourself with arguing with a 19-year-old. Like, you know what I mean? It was kind of silly. But other than that, this was great. And this is a standalone, by the way. This is standalone fantasy, which is like unheard of. And I think that I liked how it ended. I did. I think that it wasn't like the most amazing ending ever, but I like how it wrapped up. And I think all of the loose ends, at least for myself, were tied up. I didn't have any questions. I didn't have any more lingering like, oh, but what if, or what about this thing? It was like all neatly packaged in a bow and boop, you know, delivered to you at the end. There was a twist in here, like a big twist in here, and I did not see it coming. And I was just like, I audibly gasped out loud. I was like, like sitting there like, what? Like, what? It was a bit intense and a bit crazy. And I was shocked. And I could not believe the twist. And I'm like, you got me, Alexander Bracken. You totally got me. Good job. So as far as my ratings go for this book, characters, I gave it a 9. So a 9 out of 10. They were amazing. Like I said, the only thing that I really was a little bit like off on was like the big bad. How he was talking to like the younger people, and it was just, it felt odd. So that was really the only reason why it wasn't a 10. But no, I think the characters, I love them. They were great. No complaints besides that one thing. Plot, also a 9. Again, super, super good, except for the 2 little instances that I mentioned that kind of took me out of the story, but it was great. Writing was also a 9. Again, I didn't really have many issues with this book at all. Setting, I gave it a 6 because they are in downtown New York City, but at times it felt a little bit like, are we though? Like all this stuff is happening around us. It wasn't really descriptive of where they were. The city wasn't, I think like they could have gone more into like describing the nightlife of the city. Like I don't mind that she didn't though, but it just didn't have very like strong setting, even though it was in New York City. And then enjoyment was also a 9. So like this was pretty much a 9 across the board, except for the setting was not as well fleshed out, but that's fine. It didn't need to be. That ended up giving me a 8.5 out of 10 and for a 4.5 star, which I agree with. I think it was a 4.5 star. Like I said, if it wasn't for just a little bit of the YA-ness, I think it would have been amazing. It would have been a 5-star, but it was just, I got taken out of the story a little bit too much for it to be a 5-star. But hey, it was a great book, a great way to end the month of reading. You know, I went from a 2.5 to a 4.5, so yeah, it was awesome. Great book, totally worth the hype. I totally understand why everyone was reading it and raving about it, and now I want to buy it, put it on my shelves because it was just a really good story. Okay, there you have it. That is the wrap up for January. 4 books, not very much. I talked a lot though for 4 books, but I am trying to get better at this, about being more articulate and more like to the point with my wrap ups, so that you guys actually get, you know, my thoughts and stuff and not just my ramblings. And that they'll still have my ramblings, but they'll make sense, you know what I mean? So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have read any of these books or now want to or don't want to because of my wrap up. I would be curious to see what your thoughts are on these books. Leave me any kind of comments, say hello, whatever. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe if you haven't already, as I am working on growing my channel and I'd love to have you along for the ride. So thank you guys so much again for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.